The cargo bay's atmospheric recycler hummed its familiar tune as Dr. Elena Vasquez descended the maintenance ladder, her boots clanging against the metal rungs with practiced precision. She'd performed this routine inspection 1,000 times aboard the research vessel Meridian, but today something felt different. Maybe it was the way the emergency lighting cast longer shadows than usual, or perhaps the subtle vibration in the ship's hull that suggested they were closer to the Kepler 442 system than Captain Torres had let on. "Computer, run diagnostic on Cargo Bay 7's environmental controls," she called out, her voice echoing in the cavernous space filled with sealed containers and scientific equipment. "Diagnostic complete. All systems nominal, Dr. Vasquez." However, there appears to be an unauthorized energy signature emanating from storage unit 12 Alpha. Elena paused, stylus hovering over her data pad. Unauthorized energy signatures usually meant someone had smuggled contraband aboard, which would make for an interesting conversation with the captain. Define unauthorized, computer. Energy pattern consistent with a Class 7 escape pod's emergency beacon, currently operating on minimal power. That was decidedly not contraband. Elena made her way through the maze of storage containers, following the soft pulsing of her scanner until she reached Unit 12 Alpha. The massive container stood slightly ajar, which violated about 17 different safety protocols. She approached cautiously, one hand resting on her emergency communicator. "Hello?" she called softly into the darkness beyond the container door. "Is someone in there?" A sharp intake of breath answered her, followed by what sounded like someone trying very hard not to breathe at all. Elena activated her palm light and gently pushed the container door wider. Inside, wedged between supply crates and what appeared to be the twisted remains of an escape pod, sat a woman. At least, Elena assumed it was a woman, though the figure was curled into such a tight ball that it was difficult to tell. Long, silver-white hair cascaded over her knees, and she wore what looked like an environmental suit that had seen better days. "Hey there," Elena said in her softest voice, the one she usually reserved for frightened lab animals. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez. You're safe now." The woman's head lifted slightly, and Elena caught a glimpse of large, luminous eyes before the stranger quickly looked away. But not before Elena noticed something that made her heart skip a beat, elongated ears that curved gracefully upward, definitely not human in design. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice carrying an accent Elena couldn't identify, "don't alert your authorities." Elena glanced at her emergency communicator, then deliberately clipped it to her belt without activating it. "Well, that depends. Are you planning to take over my ship, eat my crew, or generally cause mayhem?" A sound that might have been a laugh escaped the woman's lips. What? No. I don't eat crews. Good to know. Do you have a name?" "Lyra." "Nice to meet you, Lyra. Mind if I ask how you ended up playing hide-and-seek in our cargo bay?" Lyra finally looked up, and Elena felt her breath catch. The woman's features were delicate and symmetrical, her skin pale as moonlight, but it was her eyes that held Elena captive, deep violet, flecked with silver, like looking into a nebula. "My pod was damaged," Lyra said, gesturing toward the wreckage. "Your ship's gravitational field caught me when my systems failed." Elena knelt down, maintaining what she hoped was a non-threatening distance. "That pod doesn't look like any design I recognize. Where are you from?" Lyra's hand moved instinctively to something at her throat, a small crystal pendant that pulsed with soft blue light. "Far. Far is a big place. Care to narrow it down? Maybe to a specific galaxy?" Another almost laugh. "You make jokes when confronted with the impossible. It's a defense mechanism. Also, you'd be surprised how often the impossible shows up on my Tuesday afternoon schedule." Elena tilted her head, studying Lyra's ears more closely. "Those are beautiful, by the way." Lyra's hands flew up to cover her ears, and she turned away sharply. "They're not." Elena blinked at the vehemence in her voice. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "You don't understand," Lyra said, her voice thick with something Elena couldn't identify. Among my people, I am flawed. Flawed how? Because from where I'm sitting, you look pretty remarkable. Lyra's grip on her ears tightened. You see with human eyes. Well, yes, they came standard with the rest of my human body. But I also happen to be a xenobiologist, which means I've spent my career studying beautiful, impossible things. Trust me, I know remarkable when I see it. For a moment, Lyra seemed to consider this. Then she shook her head, hair falling like a curtain to hide her face. You cannot help me. No one can. Elena felt something twist in her chest at the despair in Lyra's voice. Try me. I once talked a sentient gas cloud out of eating my research station by convincing it that hydrogen was more nutritious than human beings. I'm pretty good at impossible problems. This time, Lyra definitely laughed. You did not. I absolutely did. Took 3 hours and a crash course in xenopsychology, but we parted on good terms. It even sent me a thank you card. Well, technically it was a pattern of ionized particles, but the sentiment was there. Lyra peeked at her through her hair. You're making that up. Scout's honor. Although I was never actually a scout, so that might not count. Captain Torres drummed his fingers against the conference table while Elena tried to explain why their ship was now harboring what appeared to be the galaxy's first confirmed alien refugee. The holographic display showed the Meridian's current position, drifting in the void between star systems under what Torres had diplomatically termed, enhanced security protocols. Let me get this straight, Torres said, his weathered face creased with the kind of expression reserved for crew members who just announced they'd accidentally jettisoned the coffee reserves. You found a stowaway who claims to be from another world, and instead of following protocol, you decided to play intergalactic social worker. Elena shifted in her chair, acutely aware that Lyra was currently hiding in the maintenance tunnels, probably listening to every word through the ship's ventilation system. She's not exactly a stowaway if she crashed into our cargo bay, Captain. Technically, that makes her salvage. Salvage doesn't usually ask for political asylum, Elena. Fair point. But she also doesn't seem particularly dangerous. Unless you count her tendency to apologize for existing as a weapon of mass destruction. Torres sighed and pulled up Elena's preliminary medical scan on his datapad. These readings are unlike anything in our xenobiology database. Her cellular structure, brain activity patterns, even her blood chemistry, it's all completely foreign, yet somehow compatible with our atmosphere. Which suggests her people have been observing us long enough to adapt, Elena said. The question is, why reveal herself now? Their conversation was interrupted by the soft hiss of the conference room's ventilation grate opening. Lyra's voice drifted down from somewhere in the ceiling. Because my people never intended to reveal themselves at all. Elena looked up at the grate with amusement. You know, most ships have guest quarters. You don't have to live in the air ducts like some kind of elegant space gremlin. Space gremlin? Lyra's voice carried a note of genuine confusion. Earth mythology. Small creatures that supposedly sabotage machinery. Though they're usually less articulate and significantly less attractive than you. Torres raised an eyebrow. She's attractive now. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. I meant from a purely scientific perspective. Objectively speaking. Right. Objective. Torres turned toward the ceiling. Lyra, was it? Would you mind joining us down here? My neck is starting to cramp. After a moment of scrambling sounds, Lyra dropped gracefully through the grate onto the conference table, landing in a crouch that suggested gravity affected her differently than it did humans. She immediately moved to the far corner of the room, positioning herself so that the wall-mounted mirror couldn't catch her reflection. Now that's an entrance, Torres said. I don't suppose your people taught you any other party tricks. Lyra tilted her head, her pointed ears twitching slightly. Party tricks. Human expression, Elena explained. He's asking if you have any other unusual abilities. I can hear electromagnetic frequencies, Lyra said matter-of-factly. Your ship's communications array is quite chatty. Torres and Elena exchanged glances. Define chatty, the captain said carefully. It's been broadcasting automated distress signals for the past 6 hours. Something about quantum drive fluctuations in the tertiary manifold. Torres swore under his breath and activated his communicator. Engineering, this is the captain. Run a full diagnostic on the quantum drive. Priority 1. Chief Engineer Morrison's voice crackled back immediately. Already on it, Captain. We've got fluctuations in the tertiary manifold, but sensors didn't pick it up until 20 minutes ago. Elena stared at Lyra with newfound respect. You heard that 6 hours ago. Your sensors aren't calibrated for the frequency range my people use. We hear differently. That's incredibly useful, Elena said. What else can you hear? Lyra's expression grew troubled. Pursuit ships. 3 of them, running silent but not silent enough. They've been following your ion trail for the past 18 hours. Torres was on his feet instantly. Pursuit ships. From your people? No, Lyra whispered, and Elena noticed how she seemed to shrink into herself. From the harvest. The what now? Elena asked, though something cold settled in her stomach at the way Lyra said the word. They collect what they deem useful from worlds that can no longer sustain their populations. Resources, technology. Lyra's hand moved to the crystal pendant at her throat. People. Torres activated the ship's general alarm, and red lights began flashing throughout the conference room. All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. As crew members rushed past in the corridor outside, Elena reached for Lyra's hand. Why are they following you specifically? Lyra looked down at their joined hands with surprise, as if physical contact was something she'd forgotten existed. Because I carry something they want. Something that could help my people survive without their assistance. She pulled the crystal pendant over her head, and it pulsed brighter in her palm. This contains the locations of every refugee ship that escaped our world before the harvest arrived. My people scattered across the galaxy, but they're still out there, still hiding. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's life support system. How many ships? Thousands. Torres finished his communications with the bridge and turned back to them. We've got 3 bogies on long-range sensors, closing fast. They'll be in weapons range within 4 hours. Your weapons won't work against them, Lyra said quietly. Harvest ships adapt to whatever you throw at them. Well, that's encouraging, Torres muttered. Any other cheerful news you'd like to share? Lyra managed a small smile. Your coffee reserves are sufficient for another 6 weeks, assuming standard consumption rates. Elena couldn't help but laugh despite the circumstances. She can hear our supply manifests too. Electronic systems have very distinctive voices, Lyra explained. Your replicator has been complaining about substandard protein synthesis for days. Torres shook his head in amazement. Right. Let's focus on not getting harvested first, then we'll work on the coffee quality. Elena found Lyra in the botanical lab 3 hours later, sitting cross-legged among the earth plants and speaking to them in what sounded like musical whispers. The meridian had changed course toward the outer rim, following coordinates Lyra had reluctantly provided from her crystal pendant, but the harvest ships maintained their pursuit at a respectful distance, like predators content to stalk their prey. Are you giving them a pep talk? Elena asked, settling down beside a cluster of tomato plants that seemed unusually vibrant. Lyra's ears twitched, and she turned toward Elena while carefully avoiding her own reflection in the lab's polished surfaces. They're lonely. Your ship's gardens don't have enough variety for proper conversation. Plants talk to you. Not exactly talk. They sing. Each species has its own frequency, its own emotional resonance. Lyra touched a basil leaf gently. This one misses sunlight. Real sunlight, not the artificial spectrum your grow lights provide. Elena watched Lyra's fingers move from plant to plant with the tenderness of someone greeting old friends. What do they tell you about me? That you smell like curiosity and caffeine, with undertones of sleep deprivation and something they can't identify but find pleasant. Lyra paused. They also think you're attracted to me, though I explained that's impossible. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. Plants are notoriously bad at reading human emotions. Are they wrong? Elena opened her mouth to deny it, then closed it again. That's complicated. Because I'm not human. Because 3 hours ago I didn't know aliens existed, and now I'm having feelings about one who thinks she's fundamentally flawed. Elena reached for a cherry tomato, using the motion to avoid meeting Lyra's gaze. Also because we're currently being chased by intergalactic harvesting ships, which seems like poor timing for romantic revelations. Lyra was quiet for so long that Elena finally looked up. The alien woman was staring at her with an expression of complete bewilderment. Romantic revelations? Poor choice of words. Forget I said anything. But you said you have feelings. About me. Elena groaned and buried her face in her hands. This is why I stick to studying non-sentient microorganisms. They never ask uncomfortable questions about my emotional state. Your microorganisms are sentient, Lyra said matter-of-factly. The ones in your lab cultures, anyway. They've been composing what I think are protest songs about their containment conditions. Elena looked up sharply. That's impossible. I've been studying those cultures for months. Play frequency 847.3 terahertz through your lab speakers sometime. You might be surprised by what you hear. Before Elena could respond, the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated slightly, causing several plant containers to shift. Lyra moved with inhuman speed, catching a falling orchid before it could hit the floor. The harvest ships are testing your defensive systems, she said, still cradling the orchid. They're probing for weaknesses. How can you tell? The ship's hull is singing differently. Stressed metal has a very distinctive harmonic signature. Lyra carefully repositioned the orchid, then looked directly at Elena for the first time since she'd arrived. You should know something about my people. We don't experience attraction the way humans do. Elena felt her stomach drop. Oh. We bond through resonance frequencies. When two etheri find harmonic compatibility, their life songs synchronize. Lyra's ears flushed a pale blue that Elena found ridiculously endearing. I've been hearing your frequency since we met. Is that good or bad? Unprecedented. Etheri aren't supposed to resonate with other species. Elena grinned. Well, I do specialize in unprecedented biological phenomena. Their moment was interrupted by the lab's misting system activating with a mechanical wheeze, drenching them both in recycled water droplets. Elena sputtered and wiped her eyes, then noticed Lyra standing frozen with her arms outstretched, water dripping from her hair and clothes. Are you okay? I can't see my reflection, Lyra said in wonder. The water distorts everything. Elena looked around the lab and realized that for the first time since they'd met, Lyra wasn't positioned to avoid the various reflective surfaces. The misting system had created enough visual distortion that the mirrors and polished equipment no longer showed clear images. Computer, extend misting cycle, Elena called out. Extending misting cycle for botanical maintenance, the ship's AI responded cheerfully. Lyra turned in a slow circle, arms still extended, a smile spreading across her face. This is what rain feels like. You've never experienced rain. My world was mostly crystal formations and energy fields. Water was scarce. Lyra lifted her face toward the misting nozzles. Your people take it for granted. Elena watched water droplets catch the light in Lyra's hair and felt something tight in her chest loosen. Not all of us. Without thinking, she reached out and brushed a droplet from Lyra's cheek. Lyra went very still, her violet eyes searching Elena's face. You're staring, Lyra whispered. I'm appreciating. There's a difference. Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the intricate patterns in Lyra's irises, like tiny galaxies spinning in pools of amethyst. Staring is what you do at something you don't understand. Appreciating is what you do when you recognize something beautiful. Lyra's ears flushed deeper blue. I told you, I'm not beautiful by any standard. Whose standard? Some arbitrary mathematical formula your people developed. Elena reached up to gently touch one of Lyra's ears, marveling at the delicate curve. These are perfect for what they do. They're not meant to fit human proportions any more than human ears are meant to detect electromagnetic frequencies. But humans think beauty is symmetrical features and specific proportions because we evolved to recognize genetic fitness in our own species. But you're not human, Lyra. You're something entirely new and wonderful, and trying to measure that against human standards is like judging a symphony by how well it tastes. Lyra blinked water from her eyelashes. That makes no sense. Exactly my point. The misting system cycled off, leaving them standing in the sudden quiet of the garden, surrounded by contented plants and the lingering scent of artificial rain. Somewhere in the distance, Elena could hear the subtle vibration of the ship's engines adjusting course, carrying them deeper into uncharted space. Elena, Lyra said softly, what happens when this is over? When we find my people. Elena considered the question, then smiled. I guess we'll find out. But I have a feeling the universe just got a lot more interesting. Elena's quarters had become an unlikely sanctuary over the past 2 days as they approached the first set of coordinates from Lyra's crystal. The alien woman had taken to eating her meals there, claiming the dining hall's reflective surfaces gave her what she called frequency headaches, though Elena suspected it had more to do with avoiding her own image than any acoustic sensitivity. Your food replicator has terrible taste in music, Lyra announced, poking suspiciously at her synthesized pasta. It keeps humming off-key versions of what I think are supposed to be Earth folk songs. Elena nearly choked on her coffee. The replicator doesn't hum. Everything with a power source hums, Elena. Your coffee maker is currently performing what sounds like a lament for properly ground beans. Now you're just making things up. Lyra tilted her head, ears twitching as she listened to something Elena couldn't detect. Your environmental controls are gossiping about the crew's sleeping patterns, and your door mechanism has developed a crush on the one in Engineering Bay 3. Door mechanisms don't have crushes. They synchronize their opening cycles and harmonize their locking sequences. If that's not romance, I don't know what is. Elena set down her fork and studied Lyra's face. Are you always this aware of every electronic system around you? Are you always this unaware of the symphony happening in your walls? Point taken. Elena leaned back in her chair. It must be overwhelming sometimes. Lyra's expression grew thoughtful. On my world, everything sang in harmony. The crystals, the energy fields, even the quantum fluctuations in our atmosphere. Here, it's chaotic. But interesting. Like humans. Especially like humans. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at the way Lyra said it, soft and wondering, as if humans were particularly fascinating puzzles she was enjoying solving. Speaking of chaos, Torres wants to review our approach strategy. The first coordinate point is only 6 hours away. Lyra's shoulders tensed immediately. What if they're not there? What if the harvest found them first? Then we'll check the next coordinate. And the next. Until we find them. You make it sound simple. My grandmother always said the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. Lyra stared at her in horror. Humans eat elephants. It's a metaphor. We don't actually, oh, for crying out loud. Elena laughed despite herself. It means you tackle big problems by breaking them into smaller ones. Your species has very disturbing metaphors. Wait until you hear the one about killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Lyra looked genuinely alarmed. How many Earth creatures do your sayings involve murdering? Before Elena could explain that humans weren't actually serial killers of wildlife, her communicator chirped. Torres' voice filled the small quarters. All senior staff to the bridge. We've got something on long-range sensors. Elena and Lyra made their way through the ship's corridors, past crew members running system checks and preparing for whatever they might find at the coordinates. Elena noticed how Lyra unconsciously positioned herself to avoid catching glimpses of her reflection in the various displays and polished surfaces they passed. On the bridge, the main view screen showed a field of debris floating in the darkness of space. Captain Torres stood with his arms crossed, studying the tactical display with the expression of someone who'd found exactly what he'd hoped not to find. Wreckage, he announced without preamble. 3 ships, by our count. Destroyed approximately 4 days ago. Lyra moved to the nearest console, her hands hovering over the controls as if she could divine information from the ship's sensors through proximity alone. These were refugee vessels. I can hear the resonance signatures in their hull fragments. You can hear wreckage? Elena asked. Metal remembers the frequencies that shaped it. These ships sang lullabies to help children sleep during the long journey from our world. The bridge fell silent. Elena watched Torres' expression soften as the implication sank in. Any survivors? He asked quietly. Lyra closed her eyes, her ears turning slightly as if trying to catch some distant sound. There's an emergency beacon. Very faint. From the 3rd ship. Chief Morrison, can you boost our sensors to match the frequency Lyra's detecting? The chief engineer's fingers flew over his console. Got it, Captain. Weak signal, but definitely artificial. Bearing 27 Mark 15. As they adjusted course toward the beacon, Elena found herself standing beside Lyra at the sensor station. The alien woman's hands were trembling slightly, and Elena had the sudden urge to reach out and steady them. Whatever we find, Elena said quietly, we'll deal with it together. Lyra glanced at her, and for a moment Elena caught her full attention without any flinching or looking away. Why are you helping me? Your people have nothing to gain from this. Elena considered the question seriously. Because it's the right thing to do. Because you need help. And because. She hesitated, then continued, because watching you try to hide from your own reflection breaks my heart. Lyra's ears flushed that pale blue again. I told you, I'm not beautiful like human women. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She turned to face Lyra fully, not caring that half the bridge crew was within earshot. Stop, she said firmly. Just stop. I don't know what your people taught you about beauty, but they were wrong. You are extraordinary, Lyra. Your ears, your eyes, the way you move, the way you hear music in everything around you, it's all extraordinary. And if you can't see that when you look at yourself, then look at me instead. Lyra stared at her with wide eyes. Elena. Look at me, Elena repeated. See what I see when I look at you. For a long moment, they stood frozen in that bubble of intensity while the bridge hummed with activity around them. Then Lyra whispered, so softly that only Elena could hear, what do you see? Someone worth crossing the galaxy for. The proximity alarms chose that moment to sound, breaking the spell as everyone turned toward the main screen. A small escape pod tumbled slowly through the debris field, its hull scarred but intact. Life signs? Torres asked. 3 survivors, Morrison reported. Weak, but stable. As the Meridian moved to retrieve the pod, Elena felt Lyra's hand slip into hers. She squeezed gently, a promise that whatever they found in that pod, whatever came next, they would face it together. The beacon's transmitting a message, Morrison announced. It's in the same language Lyra's been using. Lyra's grip on Elena's hand tightened. It says they're the last ones. The others, the harvest took them. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she kept her voice steady. Then we make sure these 3 weren't the last for nothing. The observation deck had become their refuge as the harvest fleet closed in, 3 massive ships that Elena's instruments couldn't fully comprehend. Outside the transparent aluminum, stars wheeled slowly past while inside, Lyra sat with her back to the windows, finally allowing her reflection to appear in the polished surface without covering her ears or turning away. The survivors from the pod confirmed it, Elena said, reviewing the data on her tablet. 7 more refugee ships destroyed, 2 captured intact. But they also gave us something else. Lyra traced patterns on the deck plating with her finger, each touch producing a soft harmonic that Elena was beginning to recognize as nervous energy. The defensive frequency. Your people really did find a way to disrupt harvest technology. Not disrupt. Confuse. We learned to sing their own songs back at them, creating interference patterns in their adaptive systems. Lyra looked up at Elena with something that might have been hope. Like jamming a radio signal, but with quantum harmonics. Elena set down her tablet and moved to sit beside Lyra, their shoulders touching. Can you teach our computers to generate the right frequencies? I've been trying. Your systems are musically challenged. Hey now, our computers have feelings. Apparently. That earned her a small smile. Your environmental controls asked me to tell you that your quarters are too cold and your coffee consumption is approaching medically inadvisable levels. Noted. What about the quantum harmonics? Lyra was quiet for a moment, her ears twitching as she listened to something beyond Elena's perception. The Meridian's communication array might work, if we can convince it to stop singing show tunes long enough to focus. Show tunes. Your communications officer has been playing what I think are called musicals through the system during off hours. The array has developed strong opinions about something called Hamilton. Elena laughed despite their circumstances. Of course it has. Can we override it? We'll need to interface directly with the quantum matrix. Which means I'll have to connect with your ship's consciousness. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. Is that dangerous? For me or for the ship? Either. Both. Lyra stood and moved to the observation deck's central console, her hands hovering over the controls. There's something else you should know. Once I interface with your systems, I'll be broadcasting on frequencies the harvest can detect. They'll know exactly where I am. Then we'd better make it count. Elena activated her communicator. Captain Torres, we're ready to attempt the defensive frequency broadcast. Torres' voice crackled back immediately. All hands, battle stations. Lyra, are you certain about this? No, Lyra said honestly. But uncertainty has never stopped humans from trying impossible things, has it? Elena placed her hands over Lyra's on the console. Together. Lyra's eyes met hers in the reflection of the console's surface, and for the first time, she didn't look away. I'm still not beautiful like human women. You're right, Elena said softly. You're beautiful like you. Which is infinitely better. They pressed their hands down on the interface controls simultaneously, and the ship systems responded with a harmony Elena could actually hear, a complex melody that seemed to rise from the Meridian's bones and spread outward through space like ripples on a cosmic pond. On the main display, the approaching harvest ships suddenly wavered, their sleek forms blurring as if seen through heat distortion. Their formation broke apart as the ships began responding to conflicting signals, their adaptive systems overwhelmed by the quantum interference Lyra was generating through the ship's communication array. It's working, Torres announced over the comm, harvest ships are falling back. Their weapon systems appear to be offline. Elena watched Lyra's face as she maintained a connection with the ship's systems, her expression peaceful for the first time since they'd met. The other refugee ships, Lyra said without opening her eyes, I can hear them. They're following the signal, coming out of hiding. The observation deck's main display lit up with dozens of new contacts, refugee vessels emerging from asteroid fields, nebula clouds, and the spaces between stars where they'd been hiding for months. Each ship added its voice to the harmony Lyra was conducting, creating a symphony of survival that pushed the Harvest fleet further back into deep space. "There are so many," Elena whispered, watching the tactical display fill with friendly contacts. "My people are resourceful," Lyra said, finally opening her eyes. "We learn to hide in the spaces between things, to find beauty in broken places." Elena looked at Lyra's reflection in the console, at the way starlight caught in her impossible eyes and the elegant curve of her ears that had once been a source of shame. "Speaking of finding beauty in unexpected places." Lyra followed her gaze to their reflected images. "I look different. You look like yourself. Is that enough?" Elena leaned closer, their reflections merging in the polished surface. "It's everything." As they kissed, surrounded by the music of quantum frequencies and the light of distant stars, Elena could swear she heard the ship itself humming in approval, a gentle harmony that spoke of new beginnings and infinite possibilities. When they finally separated, Lyra was smiling. "Your ship is applauding. It has good taste. The environmental controls want to know if you'll be needing one set of quarters or two." Elena grinned. "Tell them we'll work it out. But first, we should probably help coordinate the refugee fleet." "Probably," Lyra agreed, but she made no move to step away from the console or from Elena. "Though I think they're managing quite well on their own." Through the observation deck windows, Elena could see the lights of hundreds of ships forming a constellation in the darkness, a community reborn from scattered pieces, finding harmony in their differences and strength in their shared song. "So what happens now?" Elena asked. Lyra's ears twitched as she listened to the symphony surrounding them. "Now we figure out how to build something new. Together." "I like the sound of that." "You can't hear it," Lyra pointed out. "Most of the frequency is beyond human perception." Elena laughed and pulled her closer. "I can hear enough.